Have you ever wondered, like, what happens to, those old-fashioned ideas of good and evil when the world itself feels like it's gone completely off the rails?
Yeah.
That's the kind of question you might find yourself asking after reading Cormac McCarthy's No Country for Old Men.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're, even a little bit curious about this book, but not sure if it's really your cup of tea, stick with us.
Right.
We're diving deep into the world of No Country for Old Men, the good, the bad, and the downright unsettling,
Yes.
to help you decide if you want to take the plunge.
And we'll do our best to navigate those murky waters without spoiling any of the major plot twists. So, no worries there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so first things first, what's this book actually about?
Right.
Imagine the dusty plains of West Texas in the 1980s. A drug deal goes south in a big way, leaving behind a trail of bodies and a suitcase full of cash.
Oh.
We're talking $2.4 million.
Okay.
Enter Llewellyn Moss, an average guy who stumbles upon this windfall. Sounds like he hit the jackpot, right?
Yeah. Well, not quite, because hot on his trail is Anton Chigurh, a hitman who is as relentless as he is terrifying. And let me tell you, this guy makes the Terminator look like a cuddly teddy bear.
No kidding. But here's where it gets even more interesting. It's not just a cat-and-mouse chase between Moss and Chigurh. We also have Sheriff Ed Tom Bell trying to piece together the carnage and make sense of this escalating violence. But even he, a man who has dedicated his life to upholding the law, starts to feel like the world he knew is slipping away.
Yeah, it really makes you question whether traditional morality can even survive in a world that seems to be ruled by chaos and brutality.
Right. So who is the mastermind behind this bleak but captivating tale? Well, that would be Cormac McCarthy, born in 1933, and the author of 12 novels, many of which are known for their stark depictions of violence and the darker side of human nature. In fact, the New York Times once described Blood Meridian, one of his earlier works, as, quote, the bloodiest book since the Iliad.
Now that's saying something. But even with that reputation, McCarthy has garnered immense critical acclaim, even winning a Pulitzer Prize for The Road. He is widely regarded as one of America's greatest living novelists.
And that kind of makes you wonder what critics and readers see in his work, right?
Right.
What is it about McCarthy's writing that resonates so strongly?
That's where things get really fascinating. If we look specifically at No Country for Old Men, many reviewers have praised its almost cinematic pacing. It reads like a tightly wound thriller, each scene unfolding with stark clarity.
Which is interesting considering the book was actually originally conceived as a screenplay.
Exactly. But it's not just about the plot twists and suspense. Reviewers have also highlighted the vivid characters, particularly the chilling portrayal of Anton Chigurh. They're drawn to how McCarthy explores these universal themes of violence, fate, and the struggle between good and evil.
But of course, no book is universally loved, right? So what about the criticisms?
Yeah.
What are some of the things people didn't like about No Country for Old Men?
Well, some critics found the symbolism a bit heavy-handed, like McCarthy was hitting you over the head with the deeper meaning instead of letting it unfold naturally.
And then there's the ending, which seems to be a major point of contention.
Yes, the ending. It's definitely not your typical Hollywood happy ending. In fact, many readers have described it as abrupt, unsettling, and maybe even a little frustrating.
Yeah.
But you have to wonder if that's part of McCarthy's point. He doesn't tie everything up in a neat little bow. He leaves you with questions, with a sense of unease that lingers long after you finish the last page.
It's like he's saying life doesn't always offer easy answers, and sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that refuse to give us a simple resolution. So before we delve into some literary analysis, I'm curious, what are some of the things everyday readers have been saying about No Country for Old Men? What kind of impact has it had on them?
Well, one thing that keeps popping up in online reviews and book club discussions is how the book really gets under your skin.
Yeah.
Readers talk about how it's not just a thriller. It's a story that makes you think about the nature of good and evil, about the choices we make when faced with impossible circumstances.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of readers compare it to a classic Western, but with a very modern, almost existential twist.
Right.
It's like McCarthy takes those familiar tropes of the lone hero,
Yeah.
the unforgiving landscape, and the struggle for survival, and infuses them with this sense of dread and uncertainty that feels very relevant to our times.
Absolutely. I think that's what makes No Country for Old Men so compelling.
Yeah.
It taps into our primal fears, our anxieties about a world where the old rules no longer apply.
Right.
And the line between right and wrong seems to blur with every passing day.
And speaking of blurred lines, one character who really embodies that sense of moral ambiguity is Anton Chigurh.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that he's terrifying,
Huh?
and he definitely is.
Oh, yeah.
But there's also something strangely mesmerizing about him. It's like readers are both repulsed and fascinated by his cold-blooded efficiency.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
It's a great question, and I think it speaks to McCarthy's brilliance as a writer.
Yeah.
Chigurh is a walking paradox.
Right.
He's a hitman, a killer, but he operates with a bizarre sense of almost otherworldly detachment. It's like he sees himself as an instrument of fate carrying out some cosmic plan that's beyond human comprehension.
And that whole thing with the coin toss where he leaves people's lives up to chance,
Oh, yeah.
it's just chilling.
Yeah.
It's like McCarthy is suggesting that in a world stripped of meaning, even life and death become arbitrary, a game of chance.
Precisely. And that randomness,
Right. Yeah.
that sense that we're not really in control,
Yeah.
is deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
I think it taps into a very primal fear that we all have a fear of the unknown, of forces beyond our control.
Right.
And Chigurh embodies that fear. He's like a force of nature, unstoppable and indifferent to our pleas for mercy or understanding.
It's interesting because some critics have argued that Chigurh is a symbol of pure evil, but others have suggested that he's more like a product of his environment, a reflection of the brutality that surrounds him.
Right.
What do you think?
That's the beauty of McCarthy's writing. He doesn't offer easy answers. He presents us with these complex characters, these morally ambiguous situations, and forces us to grapple with the implications ourselves.
Right.
Is Chigurh inherently evil, or is he simply a mirror reflecting the darkness that exists in all of us?
Yeah.
It's a question that lingers long after you finish the book.
You know, it's funny because even though No Country for Old Men is set in the 1980s,
Yeah,
it feels eerily relevant to the world we live in today.
absolutely.
We're constantly bombarded with news of violence, of conflict, of events that seem to defy logic and reason.
Uh-huh.
And it's easy to feel overwhelmed, to feel like we're losing our grip on what's right and wrong.
I think that's why Sheriff Bell's character resonates so strongly with readers. He's not some superhero who swoops in to save the day. He's an aging lawman, a man who has seen too much darkness, and he's struggling to come to terms with a world that seems to be spinning out of control.
He represents that part of us that yearns for a simpler time, for a world where good and evil were clearly defined.
Right.
But deep down he knows that world is gone, and he's left grappling with a profound sense of loss and disillusionment.
And his struggle, his inability to make sense of the chaos mirrors our own.
Right.
It's like McCarthy is holding up a mirror to our own anxieties,
Yeah.
our own fears about the future.
It's definitely not a comforting read, but there's something about McCarthy's unflinching honesty, his willingness to confront the darkness head on, that feels strangely cathartic.
I agree. It's like he's saying, look, the world is a brutal place, but let's not pretend otherwise. Let's not shy away from the hard truths.
And maybe by confronting those hard truths, by acknowledging the darkness that exists within ourselves and in the world around us, we can find a way to navigate through it, to find some semblance of hope amidst the chaos.
Perhaps. But even if we don't find any easy answers,
Right.
even if we're left with more questions than we started with, the journey itself can be illuminating.
Okay, before we wrap things up, I want to talk about one more thing that makes No Country for Old Men such a unique reading experience. Cormac McCarthy's distinctive writing style. Now, when it comes to McCarthy's writing style, it's definitely not your typical prose.
Right.
He's known for his sparse punctuation, his unconventional use of grammar,
Yeah.
and these long, winding sentences that seem to go on forever. It's like he's challenging the very rules of language.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's definitely a choice, and it's one that has sparked a lot of debate among readers and critics.
Yeah.
Some people find it incredibly refreshing, almost poetic. They love the rhythm of his sentences, the way he uses language to create these stark, haunting images. Others find it jarring, distracting. Even they feel like he's being deliberately difficult, that he's sacrificing clarity for the sake of style.
And, I can see both sides of the argument.
Mm-hmm.
For example, one of the things that stands out about his writing is his minimal use of quotation marks.
Right.
It's like he wants the dialogue to blend seamlessly with the narration, blurring the lines between what's being said and what's being thought.
Right. And that can be really effective in creating a sense of immediacy.
Yeah.
of being right there inside the characters' heads. But it can also be confusing at times, especially if you're not used to reading that style of writing.
Exactly. And then there's the lack of traditional punctuation. McCarthy often omits commas and semicolons, even places where you would normally expect to see them.
Right.
It's like he wants the reader to experience the language in a raw, unfiltered way without the usual grammatical signposts.
And that can be either exhilarating or frustrating, depending on your reading preferences.
Right.
Some people feel like it gives the writing a sense of urgency, of breathlessness, like you're right there in the moment. Caught up in the flow of events, others find it disorienting, like they're constantly stumbling over the words, trying to figure out where one sentence ends and the next one begins.
It's funny because some readers have compared McCarthy's style to the landscape of West Texas itself.
Yeah.
Vast, unforgiving, and stripped bare of all but the essentials.
Uh-huh.
It's like he's trying to capture the essence of that place in his prose.
That's a really interesting observation, and I think it speaks to the power of McCarthy's writing. He's not afraid to experiment, to push the boundaries of language in order to create a unique and unforgettable reading experience.
Yeah.
Love it or hate it, you can't deny that his style is distinctive.
Right.
And it definitely leaves a lasting impression.
So let's bring it all back to you, our listener.
Okay.
We've explored the plot, the characters, the themes, the critical reception, and even McCarthy's unusual writing style.
Yeah.
Now, the question is No Country for Old Men a book for you? Should you take the plunge and dive into this bleak but brilliant world?
Well, if you're looking for a light escapist, this is probably not the book for you.
Right.
But if you're willing to be challenged to confront some uncomfortable truths about human nature and the world we live in, then I would absolutely recommend giving it a try. Just be prepared for a wild ride.
Couldn't have said it better myself. No Country for Old Men is a book that will stay with you long after you finish the last page. It'll make you think, it'll make you feel, and it might even change the way you see the world. And hey, if nothing else, you'll have something to talk about at your next book club meeting.
And isn't that what great literature is all about? Provoking, thought-sparking conversation and challenging us to see the world in new and unexpected ways.
Absolutely. So there you have it, folks, our deep dive into No Country for Old Men. We hope this has given you a taste of what to expect from this complex and compelling novel. Now it's up to you to decide if you want to take the journey.